Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to Sika Stan. I am Owen. I am a strength and conditioning coach as part of Sika Strength, and today we're going to be talking about how to plan your year as a Jiu-Jitsu athlete. Now, we've helped numerous levels of Jiu-Jitsu athletes, all the way from white belts to blue belts in competitions to black belts winning Europeans and the gi and the no-gi and the worlds and masters worlds and Brazilian nationals. We've helped quite a few Jiu-Jitsu athletes over the years, and we want to go through some of the things that will help you be a better athlete, help you prolong your career, help you have more productive years, have more productive training sessions, potentially remain more injury free or reduce the incidence of injuries and recover from them a little bit faster, and hopefully have better jiu-jitsu year on year and a more reliable progression scale, and maybe for some of you potentially help you on your path to some international fame or maybe professional status. So this template you can take all the way through for everyone involved. The first thing we need to understand when we're doing jiu-jitsu, and the biggest failing we see across jiu-jitsu, is people don't have an in-season and an off-season. So every other sport, if we look at any Olympic sport, if we even look at the combat sports there like judo, wrestling, but if you look at any of those other sports, track and field, if we look at rugby, I know it's not the Olympics, but bigger power sports which require a lot of conditioning, which are tough sports, they all have an off-season or defined off-season for them. Now for them it's quite easy because most of the time we have an off-season dictated by the competitions present in their calendar year. So track and field will generally stop in the winter time and re-emerge during the summer. Rugby is the opposite. So we have these rhythms of the year that allow these athletes to take an off season because it's built into the culture. However, jiu-jitsu is a newer sport and it's growing more every year, and that professional status and that level of competition is changing year on year, and the quality of the athletes is changing, increasing, and the breadth of those athletes is getting bigger. And so we need to start acting like professionals and treating ourselves like athletes and not martial arts practitioners if we want to become the best we can be. So the first place we need to start is we need to have a defined in-season and a defined off-season. So when you hear off season, you might think, oh, does that mean I have to stop rolling? I'm not going to do that. There's no way I'm doing this because so-and-so never took an off season. They just rolled 14 times a week and then they ended up being really good at jiu-jitsu. That's the case, but good chance you're not them. Solid chance you're not taking Bomba or some performance enhancing drugs. So you need to find off seasons and in seasons. And even if you are taking BDs, these will go a lot more productive. So in the off season, we're not looking at reducing our rolling. We're looking at just doing a little bit less rolling. So not full on rolling, not no rolling. We don't want to reduce rolling altogether. We don't want to stop sparring, stop jiu-jitsu. We'll keep doing that, and we can reduce the frequency based on your frequency currently. So if you roll currently 14 times a week in your in-season, when you come into the off-season, just reduce that by 20, maybe 50%. So if it's 14 times a week, just roll 7 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. Just reduce that down. And then also just reduce the intensity of those rolls. You don't have to flow roll for everything. You don't have to go super easy all the time, but be more selective. Reduce the frequency and the intensity of those higher frequency rolls during that week and reduce them down a little bit. So we're reducing some of the resources we're using on rolling. So again, it's not no sparring, it's not no jiu-jitsu, it's just reducing that down a little bit to give ourselves availability to do the other aspects of our training that we need to do in an off season. So the purpose of the off season is to build up our non-sport specific athletic resources. So what are they? That's things like our strength. That's things like our muscle mass. It's to give our joints and our muscles a chance to recover from the sport-specific activities. It's to give you a psychological break from training. All of these are incredibly valuable, and it's a way to get a head start on these in the off-season. So by reducing our sport-specific activity, we're making it an off-season. But again, I do want to emphasize, I'm not saying you should stop doing rolling. Definitely encouraging you to not do that. But just reduce it down. If you're training 5 times a week, bring it back to 2 or 3 times a week. And you'll learn as you do more off seasons what's a viable number for you. But there's a good chance you need to reduce the frequency and intensity of those rolls. Now, in a lot of sports off seasons, we're looking at strength and conditioning. But jiu-jitsu is somewhat unique in that aspect in that we're primarily going to focus on strength, maybe like a rugby player would. We're looking at strength and power and not so much on conditioning. So when we're still going to be practicing jiu-jitsu, we're going to be getting a sufficient amount of conditioning to maintain that. And in this off season, for most of you, there's probably a good chance we need to start focusing on building a reserve of strength and potentially filling out our weight class a little bit better by having a bit more muscle mass. So we're going to either increase our frequency, in the gym. We're going to go from maybe once to twice a week to 4 times a week. Maybe we don't go to the gym at all. Maybe you just do some circuit classes in your gym, which happens sometimes. And I want you to start being more diligent in the gym and dedicating and setting aside 2 different days per week where you're going to go into the gym and do some strength training stuff. Now, we won't cover exactly what you're doing today, but I can help you out with that later. But just for now, either increase the frequency of your gym sessions, your dedicated gym sessions, or start going to the gym and start doing some strength training. So a lot of people fall into different camps here. You might be a professional athlete or semi-professional. You're a 21-year-old and you're already going to the gym a little bit in season. Start increasing that a little bit now, a bit more diligently. Or maybe you're someone like you're 35 years old. You've just got your second stripe in your white belt. You've never been to the gym before. You haven't played sports in 20 years. Now is the time just to start going to the gym a little bit and start practicing. The issue with the white belts as well is that because you're so new to the sport, your in-season, off-season aren't going to look a whole lot different. But for the purpose of more experienced athletes, this is what we're going to discuss in this particular video. So we're going to start doing more strength training, a little bit less rolling, but not no rolling. And then we're also going to start doing is just practicing plyometric movements. So this looks like things like jumping, bounding, just a little bit, not high frequency, not high intensity. These sessions are going to take you 15 minutes. And I want you to do maybe 2 of these a week. You can warm up for your strength sessions with these plyometrics. You can do stuff like moderate box jumps, bunny hops, bounds. You can do stuff like triple jump. Just give it 15 minutes total, and I just want you to start practicing those in the off season. Nothing crazy. If it feels really slow or you feel like you're just not really switched on for that day, just stop them and just continue on with your strength training session. From here, we're also just going to start doing a little bit more steady state cardiovascular work. So as I said, for Jiu-Jitsu, because the nature of rolling provides us with a lot of the benefits of conditioning, or a lot of the benefits we need for our conditioning for Jiu-Jitsu, we don't necessarily need to take a big off season on conditioning, because there's a good chance we've built a lot of that specific work. So what I want you to do here is, if you're not doing any low intensity steady state cardio or zone 2 cardiovascular work, I just want you to start doing some of that. Start at about twice a week, and then as the off season progresses, try and up that to about 4 times a week if training allows, if time allows, if you have access to that equipment. This looks like maybe a rower, a stationary bike. Some people enjoy running, but a lot of Jiu-Jitsu athletes don't particularly love running. So we're going to be looking at a stationary cardiovascular equipment, and usually rowing or stationary bike are pretty good for this. And we're just going to start off in 20-minute bouts. We're going to increase that to 30 or 40 minutes by the end of the off season. We want to build this broad base of very non-specific low intensity cardiovascular work to provide us with this general physical capacity for conditioning, which we will address later by getting more specific. So for now, we're going to do less rolling, but not no rolling. We're going to start doing some strength training or increasing our strength training. And we're going to start doing some zone 2 or steady state cardiovascular work, but not really any high intensity conditioning work outside of the high intensity rolling you might be doing not as frequently. From here, you're going to take a bit of an opportunity as well. What a lot of sports will do is zone in on a specific aspect of their sport and practice that. For example, if you were a rugby player, you'd be looking at maybe if you do line outs. If you're a kicker, if you fly half, you'll practice in kicking. Maybe if you're a different sport, if you're fencing, you might practice a particular stroke or strike. For Jiu-Jitsu athletes, what this will look like is just zoning in on stuff that your coach tells you need to work on, or that you know you need to work on yourself here. So you're replacing a little bit of that high intensity rolling in your training by working on sport specific stuff. Now, I don't know what sport specific stuff you need to work on for Jiu-Jitsu, because the sport is so broad and there's so many options available to you. But now is a great time to start looking at, is there a new guard you want to play? Is there a new choke or lock you want to work on? As your coach started hinting that you might be promoted to brown belt soon, so you need to start working on specific brown or black belt movements. Maybe you haven't really practiced wrist locks, whatever it is. Maybe your takedowns are terrible. Now is a good opportunity to start zoning in on these really sport specific activities and practicing them when you're not under a lot of pressure. And that'll become clear why we need to do those a little bit later. But for now, here's a great opportunity, and it's an opportunity a lot of sports take care of. And I would recommend you do that for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is pick something that you suck at and accept that you're going to suck at it a little bit more than usual. So whatever that guard is or whatever that takedown is, practice that for this period of time. Add a little bit more of that in. Obviously talk to your coach or whoever helps you, or you yourself, and give a little bit more time to that, because When we're less good at a movement, we're not going to be able to do it as intensely. We're not going to be able to go as hard with this new guard that we're practicing. Maybe you're practicing some kind of worm guard or lapel guard. You can't go as hard. So this artificially constrains you, but it also gives you an opportunity to practice a new move that might be very, very useful for your jiu-jitsu. So you're getting benefits by an artificial constraint, so you can't go as hard. So we're reducing that high intensity rolling. We're allowing those resources for our strength and our somewhat conditioning and building a bit of muscle mass. And we're also learning stuff that may be useful in the future for our jiu-jitsu. Now, the last thing we need to decide on is what is our body weight going to be for the year, or at least a very close range of what our body weight is. So when we're doing this also incorporates when do we take an off season. So when we take an off season, this comes back to having a plan, is we're very far out from competition. So we're going to start our off season maybe 20, 30 weeks out from our in season, maybe even longer. So our in season might last maybe 3 months the year. Let's say we take all of summer. We're going to be starting our off season somewhere around November, December, and we're going to give ourselves a good opportunity to do this, but we'll have a longer period at the end of the in season leading up to those competitions. So one of the aspects of this is deciding how long can I reasonably afford for an off season, and then how long can I afford to push for an in season. So you can't really take 10 months of the year, 11 months of the year for your in season, take a quick 4-week off season and expect to come back in good shape if you need to build up certain attributes. So you need to have a practical and realistic look at how long can you really afford for an off season, and how long then do you need to get in shape and stay in shape for competitions. So this looks like looking at the calendar year ahead. You say there's 4 competitions on in June, July and August that I want to go for. There's Brazilian Nationals, or there's a local competition, or there's Europeans in October, something like that. And you just look at these and you decide, okay, this is the time frame that my in-season is going to be, and I'm going to need 3 months to cover these competitions, and then I'm going to take 2 months before that to really put myself in good shape to actively stay in shape for those competitions. So then we might have a total of 5 months of an in-season, which is very reasonable and a very calculated time frame, which I'd recommend. And one of these aspects is deciding on the approximate body weight you need to be. Too often we see in jiu-jitsu athletes 10 kilos over, and they're going for competition, and they're like, oh, it looks pretty competitive in my weight class. I'm just going to cut 10 kilos 2 weeks before, losing a lot of muscle mass, oftentimes putting your health at jeopardy by cutting a huge amount of water weight, which is not something we want to be doing. Far better is having your weight class decided, being within a reasonable separation of that weight class to your training weight to your cutting weight. So maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 kilos. This will help you maintain your muscle mass. You'll feel better throughout the in-season. You'll keep more of your conditioning because you won't be as drained when you cut for the competition. And you won't have the psychological stress of trying to make weight and cutting calories, reducing micronutrients, reducing essential macronutrients. And you'll be in a place where if you've less weight to cut because you've decided proactively what weight class you're going to do, you're going to end up in a much better condition for that particular sport and those competitions. So deciding that body weight, deciding the competition calendar, and you'll be in a great place. So just to reiterate, in the off season, less rolling but not no rolling, more strength training, or at least start strength training, some plyometric work but nothing crazy, moderate conditioning but again nothing crazy, some specific skill work that you and your coach will decide on, and decide on the competitions and decide on the body weight you're going to be approximately be for those. Now to the in season, this is where things get sport specific. This is the period of the calendar you've decided that you're going to do competitions for several months on end. You're going to do 4, 5, 6, 7 competitions, however many is appropriate, how many you need to get experience with, and you've decided for 4 to 5, 6 months, whatever that period is reasonable for you, that you're going to start smashing competitions. This could literally be a competition every week, and we can do that in jiu-jitsu, and that might be a good idea for you. You might be someone who loves competition experience, you thrive in it and you roll through those competitions, or you might be someone who likes to be a lot more specific, a lot more tailored at your competitions, and it might be 4 competitions. But I know some very good athletes who quite literally will do competitions as frequently as they come up in those in season, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever you feel is available to you, that's your sport specific work here. But what I want to discuss in the sport specific activity, or outside that sport specific activity in the in season, is what the rest of your training will look like. So what happens when we take an off season, we lose some of our fitness for sport in the sport specific activity. Now, when we say fitness in the sports science sense, we're referring to all attributes that's involved in that sport. So that's mobility, speed, skill, muscle, conditioning. It doesn't quite refer to words that mean just conditioning. Fitness is how fit are you to play that sport. And when you've taken an off season, you've increased some of these attributes really well. You've increased your strength, hopefully. You've increased some, specific skill work. You have maybe increased your conditioning a little bit if you weren't doing a lot of conditioning before. And you've really given yourself an opportunity to be a much better athlete in that in-season. So now we need to start getting into in-season shape and then maintaining it for those competitions. So we kind of have this transition phase, but we'll still call it the in-season, where we start reducing that strength work. So again, if we went to 4 times a week, we're probably going to tailor that back to 2 good sessions a week, maybe depending on your lifestyle and your factors. If you're family and your kids, you're not professional, that might go as low as 1. But I'd recommend for most people 2 sessions per week. And from here, we're just going to start progressively increasing the amount of rolling you're doing, the amount of sessions you're doing in Jiu-Jitsu, increasing those. And when we're doing the strength work, we're really looking at just maintaining our strength available to us. We're looking at maintaining that as much as possible. Maybe you might be able to progress in some areas depending on how detrained you are, depending on how weak you are in those movements or how much capacity you've left available to you. But most of the time, we're just going to be focusing on maintaining our strength, maintaining our muscle mass. We're not going to kill ourselves in these in-season gym sessions. They're going to take less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes. We're just trying to maintain our movement. We're going to feel a little bit better when we do this. We're going to maintain our muscle mass. And then we're also going to start doing is increasing our high-intensity conditioning. So what I'd recommend is having that competition block set aside, however long that is, and then generally about 2 months prior to that competition block, start trying to get back into competition shape, but not really having any major competitions in that 2-month period. Maybe even a little bit less time. 6 weeks might be enough depending on how well conditioned you are and how fast you get back into shape. But I think an 8-week block is pretty good for a lot of people where we can really be confident that we're getting into a good competition shape. So here you start rolling more progressively, rolling more intensively, doing more frequency of jiu-jitsu sessions, increasing or start doing some high intensity conditioning. Now, I want you to save some of the high intensity conditioning for the competition period closer to competitions. So here I want you to start doing a little bit of stuff like an assault bike, a little bit of high intensity interval training on the rower or on the stationary bike, not going crazy with it, just frequency, maybe once, maybe twice a week, and keep those time periods pretty short, something like 15 minutes. Just for those couple of weeks while you start focusing more on exclusively rolling, maybe doing a little bit more rolls. Maybe you're doing 5 rolls per open mat, to put a number on it. Now you're going to start progressing to 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're going to dedicate those resources to hitting your particular rolling pattern or frequency of jiu-jitsu that you're doing. And we're going to start doing a little bit of that high intensity work. You can keep doing some of the steady state conditioning work if you feel it's good for you, and you can trade off some of that steady state conditioning work with some high intensity work, and then we're just maintaining those gym sessions, not killing yourselves too much. If you can progress some, that's great, so you don't have to worry about increasing your strength in the in-season here. We're just trying to maintain as much as possible, but we're kind of giving preference to the rolling and some of the high intensity conditioning. So we move through that kind of transitionary phase and we've picked our competition season. It might be 2 months, it might be 3 months, whatever it is. And here we'll start kind of hitting a nice rhythm between the closer we get to competition, the more rolls you do. And the closer you get to competition, the more conditioning you do, the more high intensity conditioning work you do. And then you might even need to further decrease those strength training sessions. Generally, I recommend no gym session the week of the competition, and the week before, depending how you feel and how proficient you are, you might have 1 session, you might have those 2 sessions, or some people might enjoy and prefer only having no sessions. So we might have 10 to 14 days before the competition where we don't have a gym or strength training session, and that's fine. But the important thing here to note is if you're doing a competition every single weekend, you can't really take your gym sessions off every week, because you're going to end up with 3 or 4 months, maybe more, where you don't have any gym sessions and you're not progressing your strength training, and you'll start to see a deterioration in your muscle mass and your strength, and as a result you might see deterioration in your competition and potentially increase in injuries. So from here, you need to look at how many competitions, tailor back those strength training sessions. The closer you get to competition, the more I recommend increasing that high intensity conditioning. So start getting the assault bike, the Tabata, the rowers, Tabata, high intensity work. Pick your intervals. But a really good one we like to use sometimes is you pick a 5-minute bout and you somewhat mimic the pattern of maybe a gi competition where you're going really hard for a couple of seconds and you relax for a little bit, then you're going hard again, and increase the 5-minute bouts you have available to you until you're in a really good competition shape, and then finish that season and rinse and repeat. So somewhat simply done. The specifics might take a little bit more nuance, and obviously there's much better strength training you can be doing, there's much worse strength training you can be doing. So with that being said, if you check out the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android, you can check out the Combat Sports Athlete Program. There's multiple blocks of this. Now, it's 4 days a week on the app currently, but what a lot of athletes do is they just run it 2 days a week and extend out those blocks, and they get a huge benefit from that. There's also conditioning programs on the app which will help you drastically with your conditioning for Jiu-Jitsu. And if you've problem with Jiu-Jitsu, I can't particularly help you, but I can help you with the S&C around that Jiu-Jitsu here at Sika Strength. So check out the app. It's on iOS and Android. Check it out in the link below. 7-day free trial for everyone who signs up. Lots of athletes running the combat sports program and lots of success across different combat sports. So check it out there, and I promise you won't be disappointed. And if you give yourself a good year of planning, you won't know yourself in a year's time.